Kia ora koutou and welcome to Ngā Kōrero Mō Te Wā Ki Te Heki Mai o Te Mataranga, Conversations on the Future of Education. I'm your host, Wenmoth, and today I have with me Rhonda Broussard, an educator, author and founder of Beloved Community. Well, morena here from New Zealand, Rhonda, and it's afternoon where you are, or evening, I guess. Tēnā koe.
Yes.
It's so good. I've been looking forward to this conversation with you after having heard you several times in the States, and you contributed, of course, to our Ed Rising event last time. So, tēnā koe. Look, as we start this podcast, I wonder whether you could just tell us a bit about who you are and what's brought you to where you are in your journey as an educator.
Yeah, so I'm Rhonda Broussard. Kia ora. So excited to be in this conversation. And I am originally from Louisiana, which has influenced lots of things about my education journey and the work that I'm doing presently. The things that I think stand out the most to me when I think about this long-term journey is I was encouraged to question things when I was younger. I grew up living with my grandparents for most of elementary school and lived with my parents. And in third grade, we had this program and we had T-shirts that said, it was like the letter Y and it had a cape on the back. And we were called the Wonder Whys. And my mom was like, yes, great, take all our questions. I'm tired of answering them. But like having adults respect my questions, having adults respect my wonderings, created some space for me. And then honestly, having adults not respect some of my observations, having educators not take my feedback seriously as a young learner was equally inspiring. And one, because I thought I had great ideas. I thought I had some very judicious observations about what could be different in our classroom, our learning experience. But it led me into this, what does it look like to really respect youth voice? As a young person, what does it look like to respect youth voice? And so I started teaching summer school. I was 17, and I was working with middle school students and teaching summer school programs. And that gave me even more positive experiences, but also a greater sense of agency and commitment to youth voice. Like if these adults trusted me and created a framework and scaffolding and a training and feedback and support for me to succeed here, we can do this for more young people. And so as a classroom teacher, that was my perspective. Eventually teaching in IB schools gave me a lot more language around inquiry pedagogy. Then leading IB schools gave me even more insight into what that looks like in preparing adults who themselves haven't experienced an inquiry-based environment, on how to engender inquiry and wonder with young people. And then eventually, after my first trip to New Zealand, how we think about inquiry and wonder for adults, right? That this is something that has to stop in youth. It's not an activity or an exercise for young people. It's a way that we can all approach the world. So that's one thread that I think has definitely positioned me for where I am right now, and also informs the ways that I think about what's next.
Listening to what you've just said kind of makes sense when I think about the byline of your book, was how countries prepare youth to lead. That really got to me when I saw your book, and I think it's something that there's a bit of tension around the world, it seems, at the moment between what you said, inspiring young people to ask questions and to inquire and to be, agentic about the future.
Yes.
But education systems like what's happening in New Zealand at the moment, where the emphasis is going away from that and thinking to prepare young people for the future, they simply need to know how to read and write and so forth. What's your experience there? What's your perspective?
What my perspective is, and I think it's something that we explore in different ways and different chapters in the book, is both of those ways of though both of those systems of expectations for young people exist concurrently. The question is for whom, right?
Ah,
And so young people who are coming from more resourced environments, from environments where their parents have high levels of education, the parents have high levels of earnings, are more likely to be in schools where that agentic pedagogy is not questioned, right?
right,
They have opportunity room to explore. And in some places, that might happen in special programs within a school, and I got to experience it in special programs within a school,
right,
right? But at the same time that I was experiencing it in our um, local neighborhood school, I have an uncle who's 3 months older than I am, so he and I were in school together for early elementary years, and in the very same building, he's not experiencing that same type of education.
right,
He was very much experiencing the you've just got to be able to do the basics, and we're going to drill and drill and drill and read and write, sit in the desk, wait for instruction. And so when I say that, like my attention to this has been my attention to these inequities in education access and who gets what type of learning, and how we invest in youth experience started young. I do really mean that young, right? Like
right,
there were times where um, we would we would go when we were in the same school building, we would go out to recess, and he was a faster runner than I was. And so he's like, okay, I'm gonna go, I'm gonna run to the other side of the playground and get you the swings. And then when you get there, I'll give up my swing and you can swing while you're on recess and I'll go play. Um, and I love that. I was like, yeah, this is great. A great little system at recess. And then there were times where we were in a different school building, so we were a little older. And we would finish recess and I would go into my program and he would go to his program. And we went into like an afternoon of self-directed learning.
right.
And and I would be sitting there thinking, he would like to be doing this with me.
Mm,
He would like to be in self-directed learning. He would like to be learning how to play chess or tinkering with Capsella and creating something new and reading a comic book on the couch. Um, and he didn't have that expectation. And so um, yeah, I think both modes of teaching and learning and those sets of expectations not only can exist, but do exist concurrently.
right.
And the real interrogation for us has to be who gets access to them? Who do we think is worthy of having that much agency in their own education? And who are we trying to prepare for the future of work?
Yeah.
Prepare for the future, right? Of compliance and production.
Because you're fairly explicit about your link, the work that you do, the link between education and the economy features in a lot in the way you're thinking here. And it's often sort of an unpopular thought to think that, education is about service to the economy, but
Mhm.
we can't
Mhm.
differentiate those things, can we?
Well, I mean, it's when we think about like the big history of education, we can differentiate them because there were times when the purpose of education was not service to economy.
Sure.
Um, and um, and so we know that it's possible, right? We know that there's a world where humans were not identifying education as solely service to economic gain and development. In our generations, in our time, it's harder and harder to find city systems, state systems, or country systems that really allow us to divorce education and economic access.
I think when I think about education and the economy in this modern context, Rhonda, I go back to what I hear a lot about now, and some of the previous people I've talked to here talk about the goal of education is about flourishing, about helping kids to flourish. And for me, that's where the connection with economy comes into focus. So it's not
Yep.
so much that we're preparing them for the economy or to be economic
Mhm.
units,
Mhm.
but it's preparing them to flourish, which would include understanding how they can earn a living or how they can contribute to that and make life for others. Is that how
Mhm.
you would see that?
Mhm. I think it's really fair. I think we also have a series of conversations in the States, at least, about education as preparation for civic engagement. And how do we, right, an educated society to be able to actually advance and influence policy and decision making um, in what feels like in our times, a very fragile democracy. But this goal, right, that education is a civic pursuit, and prepares us. And I think in some ways for like those big wonderings and those big, really hard to answer, um, the hardest to answer problems, but like how do we grapple with things? And that
Mm.
education can be a way that prepares us to grapple. We all go back to the Socratic seminar training and like what does
Yeah,
it mean to enter into this great conversation that at times has the culmination is more wondering and
yeah.
less resolution. Which I think also that level of intellectual engagement is a form of the flourishing.
Right.
So are we are we preparing people to flourish in that same intellectual way and assuming that all people can, right? To the best
That's
of
right.
their
That's right.
capacity,
Yeah.
right? We can all spend time wondering about something.
Yeah, I like that idea of civic engagement because, in a fair and just society, that's what we would see. But there's a question that always comes to my mind when I hear that. And I remember programs, there was a big debate in New Zealand some years ago where Australia had civics as a compulsory part of
Mm,
its education system.
mhm,
And there was some
mhm,
thinking that we should have it here. And it raised a debate which was never fully resolved, in my view, that in many instances that were observed or reported on, civics became almost a euphemism for formal compliance to a particular worldview or a particular way of understanding what
interesting.
civics is. And I know you and
Interesting.
I've had conversations before, and I know that it's particularly important to you that part of being part of the future society is being culturally connected, understanding who we are,
Mhm,
and that
mhm,
we sit
mhm.
in a world that's very culturally diverse. And so civics that's presented through the perspective of one worldview ain't going to cut it, is it?
Right, 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 right. It really doesn't. And this space to say, what's missing from my analysis? What's missing from the set of texts or inputs that I have that's informing the worldview, I think is um, something that, if I think about our civics curriculum in the US, is largely unexplored, right? Like the civics curriculum in the US, which is usually a half credit, a half year of civics is required for graduation.
All right.
Um, mhm. And it's very much uh, memorization of what the ideal state of our civic society should be.
Hmm.
Here is how the government is supposed to work. And there's very little time on the exploration of why do governments work in this way? Why
Yeah.
do people organize themselves in these ways? How would you create your own political organization or self-governing or co-governing model?
Yeah.
Um, what do other governing models look like in a way that is non-judgmental,
Hmm.
right? There's a lot of one-way thinking that shows up in our stated civics curriculum. That's like, yeah, you're learning how this country works and why the way the civics model in this country is the best model.
Right.
What makes it, I think, really hard for young people and adults, again, to interrogate what's happening in our current political environment, um, and understand what other types of civic engagement and civic structures exist in other places without judging them or demeaning them.
And I've been fascinated over the years that I've known you to just keep abreast of the beloved community work. I love that.
Mm,
I love your organization name because that somehow brings a much more connected from the heart view of the work you do than just simply a temporal view as well. And I read, if I can come to one of the blog posts that you posted early on, of
mhm.
a teacher, Anna Ponce, is it that
Oh, Ana Ponce.
it just have caught my eye. I've just got it up on screen here. She says in her thing, she said that the mission at her school was to prepare students to succeed in life. We want our kids to be compassionate leaders, critical thinkers, and problem solvers, and to
Yes.
thrive in a culturally connected and changing world. And I thought, whoa, if only that could be what our system does. I wonder if you can share a bit about your work in beloved community and kind of how you're, because you're one of the activists I see in education. You don't just talk about it, you do stuff. And I'm interested to hear about some of the stuff you do.
Yes, yes, we do stuff. I mean, I think one, I'm just like flooded with memories of visiting the school that Anna was leading at the time, and what it looked like for those young people to engage in deep community and repair.
Mhm.
Um, again, like young teenagers, and it was my first time seeing a space with that much care among 12 and 13-year-olds.
Right.
For yeah, for each other, for their commonly held values. Um, and yeah, wonderful. How lucky am I that I get a chance to see such amazing educators in action. At Beloved, I mean, these questions of youth voice and agency are still at the forefront of our work. Like I keep pulling that same thread with me, Derek, everywhere we go. And so I think one of the ways that that thread has continued in our work has been with the launch of our Youth Participatory Action Research academies,
Oh,
where in the summer months, we train 14 to 18-year-olds on one, understanding the power of research and that there is a non-academic exercise. There is a real world application of this that they could um, implement for their own wonderings, establish their own research agenda, ask questions that matter about the ways that they're experiencing the world, the ways they're experiencing their current learning environment or their work environment, and we train them in some research methodologies, quantitative and qualitative. They start off when they apply to the YPAR Academy, they start naming like, here's some things I might want to research, right? Here's some things that
yeah.
are on my mind. And then we kind of refine that. So they spend a month thinking about researchers' power, um, understanding some new methodologies that they might access. Halfway through, they bring in trusted adults where they share, this is what we've been learning this summer. So I'm getting ready to do. And then they go off to do some data collection in their community. And it could be they choose which tools mattered for them.
Right.
Um, and they come back at the end of the summer with some data to co-analyze. And then we invite their trusted adults back into the space and they present, it almost feels like a dissertation defense. They present the questions that they asked and with which methodologies they chose and why, what their findings were, opportunities, right? Limitations to their research, opportunities for someone to pick it up next. And because we're designed around this bias to action, right? We're not doing research for the sake of research. Yes, these are transferable skills that you can take back to school with you. You can take them to work. You can take them to any learning environment. And we want you to do that. These are yours to keep forever. Um, but specifically, we want you to then be able to take these skills and leverage it for some policy action in your environment. What is something that you can get um, decision makers to do differently as a result of your wonderings? So then they workshop their ideas with usually it's educators from their school or from a youth development program and try to get something to be different.
Right. That sounds a
Um,
powerful thing, powerful. Have you got an example of a change that's been made as a result of one of those research projects?
yes. So one of them, there was, I think this was 2 summers ago in New Orleans. We asked young people that summer to all consider questions around youth mental health.
Oh, yeah.
And it was a broad invitation. About 66% of applicants talked about social media impact on teen mental health as the wonderings that they were coming in with. But then when we got to in this particular summer, young people organized themselves into groups. And so they weren't doing individual research. And so the groups, one of them, um, in their research, they were looking more at questions around access. Like, do young people know that there are resources available to them?
Okay.
Um, do they value the resources available to them? do they access the resources available to them? And why or why not? Right. So that kind of line of questioning. So they could come back and say, oh, actually, we had some people who said they didn't value talk therapy, or they were less trusting of some settings where they might be able to get some supports. And so what they workshopped with their educators was, how could we have a group setting that had the credentialed, certified, licensed mental health providers in the space, and some additional faculty or staff members that young people might have a closer relationship with. And they went off to pilot that type of a setting with their school. And that it felt like a huge win, both for not just for the process of this academy to policy action, but for them to be able to sit down with the adults and say, this is what we think is broken. For the adults to be able to hear and offer, okay, let's, like, in real time go through this negotiation of, okay, we could change this, we couldn't change that. Let's try this type of pilot, and then we'll come back and see if it's getting to better results with young people.
That's great. So that was with 17, 18-year-olds, you still, was it?
They're out, yeah. That particular group might have been 15 and 16, but yeah, the age range is usually 14 to 18.
Okay. Because
Yeah.
a comment that I often hear around that sort of social action, or inquiry-based leading to social action thing, is that it's suitable for older students, and certainly in terms of the methodologies, and I can understand where it comes. But it seems to me that I also, in my work, get to see some exciting things happening further down the school. That's that setting the scene for that. Do you have
Yes.
experience in that level as well?
Yes. Yes, absolutely. I think this is one of the stories I shared in the Ed Rising panel, that when I was running our school network, we started this particular expectation in the curriculum in grade 2,
Right.
where yes, where there's a unit where young people are learning about social justice movements, right? And that was, at the time at least, it was part of state curriculum, right? You learn about world leaders and the kinds of change that they advocated for, et cetera. So common content. But with our perspective, we said, okay, they can, yes, come and learn about what other leaders have done. And the unit typically ends with like a living museum, and every student picks, Cesar Chavez and Rigoberta Menchú and Thich Nhat Hanh, and they incarnate this person and tell you about their life. Wonderful, super cute. Take all the pictures. Both of my children chose Harriet Tubman for this exercise. And in a traditional space, the unit ends with that living museum.
Right.
In our curriculum, after the living museum, then the teachers say, okay, what is something in your life that you actually want to change?
Oh.
Right. And it could be something, it's an open invitation. It could be something in our classroom. It could be something in our school or our school network. It could be something at home or in your faith community or in your sports community. So the first set of exercises is all of these 8-year-olds just thinking about what's something they might want to change. And so they're going through their lists and reflections and brainstorming. Then the next set of questions is, who has the power to change it?
Yeah.
Right? So then they're identifying where that power lives. Is it you? Is it your peers? Is it the teacher, the building principal, parents, all of that? So they identify, okay, here's who my influence targets are. Here's who I need to get to change. And then they all build some campaigns.
Yeah.
And at the school, because it was a written part of the curriculum for us. So school leaders knew in February, the second graders are coming. And they're going to come with some questions and some data and some pushes around something they think needs to be changed in the school. And so a big part of our work was making sure the adults were ready for that, right? Like, I always wanted our schools to be a place where when the young person says, why are we doing this? You have a real human, let's co-create a response together, not because I said so,
Yeah.
or why did you, or you get in trouble for asking the question, right? And so in that, things that were pretty common, like, so as the head of the school network, I would often get the questions about uniform. We had uniforms at the time.
Yeah.
So like young people who wanted to push on uniform, they would come and talk to me about uniform. Um, some students would look at things around recycling and environmental action in agency, and they would go and talk about that. Um, but this one study that my daughter was this group that my daughter was a part of, they were in a building where there were lockers because the building used to be a high school. We're in elementary. I think it was maybe K4 at the time.
Oh.
So everyone had cubbies in their classrooms, and we
Mm.
didn't use the lockers. And this group of students said, well, we're the only students here. What are you saving the lockers for? We should have access to these. And they identified that the head of school was the right person to address. And so they scheduled an appointment, went down to talk with the head of school. And the head of school said, oh, I'm not here to oppress you. I actually don't have access to the lockers. When we took control of this building, we need to get a locksmith in here who can give us the master key because we don't have one. We actually can't use these. Um, and and they said, okay, well, what does it take to get that? And he gave them a number, like, I don't know, $379.82. There's a quote. They said, okay, wonderful. Then they went back and said, how can we get the money to get this master key? They decided to sell lemonade at lunch. They spent the spring selling lemonade at lunch. And then they walked back into his office with ostensibly a bowl full of change. Um, that was enough money to get this master key. And they did that. And then they wrote a locker bill of rights because for them, they didn't win the individual right to lockers or their classroom right to lockers. They're like, no, this is for the whole school. We all should be able to access this. So they wrote a locker bill of rights, naming some kind of basic principles like you don't lose your classroom cubby if you choose to take a locker. A locker will be offered to you. You don't have to use it
Mm.
if you don't want to use it. And, I think I can't remember if they were like combination locks on the locker or the kind where you provide a locker, but there was
Mhm.
something
Mhm.
about, for security reasons, people may need to access your locker, things like that. Um, they also, though, Derek, decided in their lock of Bill of Rights, as second graders, that they thought the kindergartners weren't mature enough.
Oh.
So, right. So even
Ah,
at age 8, when they had agency and power, they chose to exclude some people.
yeah. Yeah.
Which was, we're like, huh, why is that? And they gave their reasons, and we're like, well, if this is what you're offering, someone else could counter it. No one countered at that time, but it really was it remains for me a very, very clear example of, again, what's possible when you give young people the space
It,
to
it,
ask them.
and it seems to me that that's a wonderfully clear example of learning about civic engagement. It's not something abstract and out there. That's something real,
Right.
and it
Yeah.
involves me. Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
I think
Yes. And you can um approach it from this generative way, right? Because it's once this unit happens in second grade, it just keeps happening, right? You don't have to keep teaching them how to do it.
yeah.
They just keep doing it. And so like I remember it might have been the year after that, there were students in another school in our network who learned that one school had something with their recycling program that they didn't have. They're like, what? That's cool. And so then they start their campaign. Yeah. They're like, we actually need to go and meet with the decision makers and get some things to be different here.
Yeah, which is a good indication, really, of how you've seeded that idea of the
Mhm.
ability they have to make that change, which I think, there are so many people in our schools and our society, and even among our teachers, who feel disempowered that it's not
Exactly.
something they can do, so they don't push back.
Exactly.
One,
Exactly.
one of the thoughts just going through my mind as I was listening to both of those examples, because both of them involve your students interacting with a much wider group of people than just those who are in their classroom, with
Mhm.
parents, with community, with leaders, and so forth. And one of
Mhm.
the one of the things that's come up in a number of the conversations I've had like this recently is that notion of we live in a learning ecosystem. We can't see that single classroom, single teacher kind of mindset. So as we're
Mhm.
thinking
Mhm.
about the future of education, it seems to me that that's something that you're illustrating so well in the work you do almost naturally, is you are introducing students to the ecosystem that they're a part of. And it's not just the students then that become the learners, but their parents and other members of the community as well. Is that how you would see that?
It is, and there are times where in our work at Beloved, we're doing the same type of process, but with the adults, right? Who
Mm.
themselves didn't realize that they could have more agency and power in their own work environment, or in their learning environments. And what we've seen with the adult participatory action research work, and even some of the capacity building with educators to help them expand their understanding of shared voice and shared power, right? Like as a building administrator, you actually could ask your teachers a lot more for a lot more guidance
Mm.
and input into what's happening in your building than you think. And here are some ways to practice doing that.
Yeah.
That when we do this with the adult environments, then it has this ripple effect for them,
Mm.
where it's not just about like upwards management or upwards advocacy, but really seeing themselves as more capable for questioning anything in their lives, and designing an experience, designing a future for themselves, designing a pathway for themselves, that wasn't previously presented.
Yeah. I
And
think,
that's one of the things that I get most excited about, because they'll say, I didn't just do, we did a series where for 3 years we trained early care education workers in the same
yeah,
model. And they will say, I didn't just become a PAR researcher. My whole family
yeah,
knows what PAR research is, right? Like everyone has been experiencing this with me and has been able to observe the changes in me in the ways that I lead
yeah.
as a result of me getting
I,
this kind of formal training.
I think you've summed up beautifully something that I see as very effective about agency, because the book that I've written on agency emphasizes the
Ooh,
fact that it's not just about me, but it's about us. It's about the responsibility we have of working together, which aligns, of course, with all the things that we're reading now about
yeah.
collective efficacy, and
Mhm.
if that future society, civic society, all those things that we've talked about here actually aren't just about me, it's about
That's
us.
right.
Um,
That's right.
so I'm curious. I'm just watching our timing here, and I always try and keep these going. But I wonder if I can flick it back to you. Thinking
Uh-huh.
these are conversations about the future of education. If there was
Mhm.
just one piece of wisdom or advice or something you'd like to say to an audience about how you would like to see the future of education, it might be a way it works or a direction it goes or a change that needs to be made. What's the final word you'd like to give here, Rhonda?
Yeah. I mean, for me, it goes back to something we talked about earlier. What I want for the future of education is this sense of agency, voice, and power to be extended, expected, afforded for every human everywhere on the
Yeah.
planet. I mean, everyone can do this, everyone can think in these ways, and push themselves. And I want our future of education to actually reach everyone in the same way.
Rhonda, it's been an utter joy having this conversation. And like always, these could go on for ages and ages. And you and I have spoken in the past like this. I'm looking forward to
Mhm.
seeing you in New Zealand fairly soon, and we'll be sending material out about that opportunity for others who may be listening to this. But in the meantime, I just want to thank you sincerely for taking the time out of your day in a snowy Ontario, I believe, uh,
Yes.
to have this
Um,
conversation.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation. Yes, I look forward to seeing you soon.
Thank you. Ka kite anō.
Ooh, Kakitiano.